Hi class, my name is Jesus Carrasco and I just finished reading Roseanna by Ma Chauvin and Pierre Ballou. Cultural and historical context. The crime takes place in 1965 in Sweden. During the 1960s, police in Sweden did not have access to handheld radios, computers, or cell phones. In the 1960s, people in Sweden depended vastly on public transportation and their own 2 feet to get around. Even the police used public transportation or their feet to track their suspects. During the 1960s, Sweden was experiencing an exceptional economy and social prosperity. The unemployment rate was low, however, Sweden was experiencing a housing shortage as more people were moving to the city. In 1965, the Vietnam War was about 10 years into the war. Detective Martin Beck is considered a highly skilled detective. Detective Martin Beck is a detective for the Swedish National Police. He worked for the department for 21 years, and of those 21 years, 8 of those years were spent in the Homicide Bureau. He is respected by his peers and is considered to be the best detective on the force. He is intelligent and demonstrates great tenacity in solving crime. Detective Beck is married with 2 children and has a poor relationship with his wife. I imagine eventually he will probably end up in a divorce. Detective Beck avoids being at home and is constantly thinking about his homicide cases when he is at home. The crime in this novel is murder. On July 8, 1965, the murdered body of a white female was found murdered in Bornsalt, Sweden. The body of the female was found in a channel of water where a construction project to increase the accessibility by boats was underway. The body of the female was found naked, appeared to have been raped and strangled. It was believed the body could have possibly been from a tourist aboard a cruise ship in the area. The name of the victim was not initially known. After 3 months into the investigation, the victim was identified. It was learned she was aboard the Diana cruise ship. The victim. The victim was identified as Roseanna McGraw. She was born on July 1st, 1928, in Lincoln, Nebraska. Her occupation is librarian, and her marriage status, she was single. She did have a behavior of concern, which was that she had a history of promiscuity. Possible suspects and misleading clues. Because it was believed Roseanna was murdered aboard the Diana, the possible suspects were everybody who was aboard the ship. That consisted of 69 cruise passengers, 15 deck passengers, and 16 crew members. So as you can imagine, this is going to make for a long and challenging investigation. Misleading clues. Detective Beck and a crew of detectives began to track and interview every person who was aboard the Diana. They came across Carl Erickson, who was a fireman on the Diana and had a prior sex with a minor conviction. The reader is led to believe the suspect has been discovered. However, after a thorough investigation, Carl is cleared and the investigation continues. Social aspects. The social aspect in this novel was promiscuity. It was learned by Detective Beck's investigative team that Roseanna was quite promiscuous. Roseanna's ex-lover was interviewed in the United States and he informed them Roseanna lived a life of promiscuity. In addition, Roseanna's girlfriend was also interviewed and she also confirmed her behavior. She added that Roseanna had slept with one of her lovers, which caused the end of their relationship. Promiscuity was not accepted in 1965 and was pretty much considered illicit behavior throughout the world. Systems of power. I have identified 2 systems of power. The first one is the highly skilled investigative tactics by Detective Beck and his team of investigators. They displayed great tenacity in working this crime until they solved it. The second system of power was the power the suspect had over his victims. Detective Beck interviewed 2 of the suspect's ex-lovers who were both hesitant in providing any information about the suspect's behavior. One lover preferred to flee the country than to provide information to Detective Beck. Later, Detective Beck came across information the suspect had potentially severely battered the victim during their relationship. However, without her interview, nothing could ever be done. The rules of detective stories. The authors of Roseanna did a great job of following many of the detective rules laid out by S.S. Van Dyne, P.D. James, and Raymond Chandler. The novel involved a murder, and the investigation, and the characters were very believable. The reader had the same opportunity as a detective to solve the mystery. All the clues were clearly described. The novel contained a detective who was intelligent and diligent. This novel pretty much followed the rules and did not deviate from them. Conclusion. I felt the novel was well written. The murder, especially the investigation, was believable. Being a former investigator, the story explains the sometimes long and frustrating experience of investigating crime when there is not much to go on. The fashion in which the life of Detective Beck is portrayed in this novel is also very spot on. Many dedicated detectives often neglect their families, turn to alcohol, and constantly think about work when at home. The authors did a good job of describing the lifestyle of the murderer and the reason why he would be capable of committing the crime. So I have a spoiler alert here. Ultimately, the suspect confessed he killed Roseanna because he detested women who were promiscuous. I found the reason to be very original. I did not find any major negatives with this novel. Thank you.